Welcome into another edition of Pete's Pigskin Preview, presented by Meadowbrook Wealth Advisors of Raymond James. I'm Neil McCready in the Clark Ford Studios, joined as always by my good friend Pete DeWeese, MPW digital football expert. It is Ole Miss at Arkansas on Saturday, 11 a.m. on ESPN. In case you're wondering, there's a 60% chance of some scattered showers. The rain forecast continues to sort of diminish as the week progresses, as weather is apt to do in the South and likely elsewhere. But I've never lived anywhere outside of the South, so I can't speak to that with any degree of authority, but I'm guessing. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Ole Miss's 26-14 win this past Saturday over Oklahoma. The Rebels now 6-2 overall, 2-2 in the SEC, ranked 19th nationally. Arkansas, by the way, 5-3 overall, 3-2 in the SEC, and not ranked in any of the major national polls. Pete, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. All right, we'll get into your thoughts on Oklahoma. We'll get into some. We're going to look at a brief look at Arkansas's defense. My guy that I used to cover, Travis Williams, when he played at Auburn back a gazillion years ago when Travis was in his teens and early 20s, and I was actually young enough to remember when that was. I covered Travis. He was one of my favorite people that I've ever covered on a couple of really fun Auburn teams. He's the defensive coordinator at Auburn. We'll look at him, and then we'll talk about Bobby Petrino and his offense. Bobby Petrino, a guy who, when he was the offensive coordinator at Auburn, was an absolute prick, and I covered him 1 year. But he is he is a very good offensive coordinator. He's done a good job with the Razorbacks. So Pete will take a look at what Arkansas does offensively. But first, I want to tell you that we are brought to you each and every week by Meadowbrook Wealth Advisors of Raymond James. It's a full-service investment team based in Jackson, providing financial planning and investment management to clients across the state and surrounding areas. Ryan Geary and his partners are a local team that utilize the strength and resources of a national firm to bring their clients an impeccable level of service. This includes access to investment strategies, portfolio managers not available to all investors. If you are interested in a no-obligation consultation, or you just want to be added to their monthly market update email list, reach out to financial advisor Ryan Geary with Meadowbrook Wealth Advisors of Raymond James at 601-368-2215 or Ryan, R-Y-A-N, Geary, Geary, at RaymondJames.com. Raymond James and Associates Incorporated, member New York Stock Exchange, SIPC. All right, Pete, I think the Ole Miss Arkansas game went about the way you sort of expected it to kind of go. You've had a few days to think about it. Any takeaways from the Sooners and the Rebels before we shift our attention to the Razorbacks?
Yeah, I thought Oklahoma, they came in with a good plan and kind of showed some wrinkles. At the end of the day, there was no overhaul of the offense. It was, here's what we do best. How many different ways can we do it? Try to keep Ole Miss off balance early. Stay out of long down and distance situations. And I do think that early on, they presented things in some ways that I think, it may have caught Ole Miss, just messed with some eyes. And maybe, if you're Pete Golding in the Ole Miss defense, you're probably feeling your way in a little bit because you aren't sure what might be different. They obviously settled in the second half and played completely different. I think the big thing for Ole Miss was how were they going to respond without Trey Harris on the field? And so they did it a couple of different ways. I thought all the way back to preseason, to going into game one, when we talked about will they play with two tight ends on the field? And for the first time, this season, we saw that in mass. We saw several snaps, particularly early on, where, you've got Prescorn and Wright on the field at the same time. Sometimes both lined up in the core connected to the box. Sometimes one of them's out wide while the other is more of a true traditional tight end or sniffer. And so they moved them around. They got them both involved in the passing game. And, it's one of those things all season long. And I have Ole Miss fans in my building at work that hit me up in the hallway and ask me questions all the time. And And I have friends that send me text messages, and there have been questions, why aren't we getting the tight ends the ball, and why aren't we doing that? And, honestly, my answer after last Saturday was Ole Miss found a defense that wanted to play zone, and they found ways to manipulate the zone coverage. And that is where the big bodies that are good at finding space, like Pigskin is, are going to excel. Play in LSU, play in some of the teams that they've played a little bit more recently. It's been a ton more man-to-man coverage. And I'm not to belittle or diminish any of the gifts that Caden Prieskorn has. Him in man coverage in the right matchup can be very good, but when teams are able to put a safety on him and somebody that is a little bit more fluid, it's that's not a place where Dart's naturally going to take his eyes and his progression, and so that plays a major role in the distribution of the ball is matchups and coverage. That's always going to be important and matter. And so they finally found a defense that wanted to play zone. And what we talked about last week was Jackson Dart had to be really good with his eyes, had to really understand the picture that he was getting because of how much that picture can change. And I thought that Ole Miss and Jackson Dart in particular handled that very well. They found where the open grass was. They took advantage of some coverage looks. And they were able to do it with multiple personnel groupings. It was good to see Jordan Watkins get involved in the offense. Caden Lee had a couple of big plays, which you've seen. I think they're still waiting to really see Juice Wells kind of take off in the offense. It hasn't happened yet. He's been productive at times. He's had a drop or two here or there, and they've missed him a couple times when he's been open. And I'm sure they would tell you that they really want to see him kind of get going as this thing moves forward. They were effective running the ball. They weren't great. They used Dart when they needed to. They didn't have to do it a ton. Honestly, to me right now, in the run game in particular, because, listen, Oklahoma's been pretty solid on defense against the run in the pass. They have been a solid SEC defense. And so, to see them be somewhat effective at times where Ole Miss struggled the most was in short yardage situations. Whether it was packing things in and putting Pegues in the backfield or just staying in a more traditional personnel grouping and keeping Parrish in the backfield, they weren't great in the short yardage game. And at some point, they're going to have to find answers there. They're going to have to be a little bit more creative in how they generate those yards. They've been able to lean on Pegues, but his teams just, get more and more into the box and Ole Miss, still finding the right mix and bodies still kind of changing up front. They have to be more productive. One interesting thing to me was I saw Kiffin, in the press conference talk about the tight ends and receivers didn't particularly block that well. And I kept thinking that as I went back and rewatched it. And honestly, I thought that there were several times where the tight ends did a great job. But in some of those crucial short yardage situations where defenses it's much more predictable, defenses are going to treat gaps a little bit differently, be a little bit more run oriented in their approach. That's where I think you saw the tight ends maybe struggle the most, and those are those elements that again I think Kiffin knows. Obviously, for what he makes, he definitely knows. But he knows what that has to be cleaned up, and they have to be solutions. At the end of the day, there was a point in the fourth quarter where I think you said last week you expected Ole Miss to win 28-14, and I was sitting there at one point looking at the scoreboard going, "Oh, Neil's about to hit this." Every
once in a while, Pete.
Listen, hey, I'll take every once in a while. Just let it be the nights that I roll into Tunica or Philadelphia, or heaven forbid if they ever let me, my wife ever lets me book flights to Vegas. So, I'll meet
you in Vegas. I love Vegas.
I probably would love Vegas myself. So, but no, ultimately the first half, obviously you don't expect to be down. There's concern about the way the defense is playing in the first half of that game. You'd seen, and obviously the early spark from the offense, and then things had kind of tapered a little bit. They just missed on some things. And then in the second half, they really settled in. And once the defense started to control early downs and get them into predictable third down situations, that's when the game started to change. And that's when you saw the sack numbers really start to pile up. And that's going to be a similar challenge this week against the Arkansas offense. If your Ole Miss is controlling those early downs, trying to make Arkansas a little bit more predictable, because you can get to the quarterback. Now you got to get him when you get there, because he can certainly make you miss and do some crazy things. But the ability to break down protection and get there exists when you can get them into those situations. So, Ole Miss, that they just, if they can come out and play a clean football game, should be a fun one on Saturday. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, me too. I've said this all along. I've seen both of these teams play in person over the past 14 days or so. I guess I don't know. I lose track of days. I guess I saw Arkansas in person as we record this 10 days ago. And I've obviously seen Ole Miss in person 8 times. I think Ole Miss is better than Arkansas. 10 points better. I think Ole Miss will have to play poorly not to win. But you're right. I mean, Green is dangerous. And if you allow him to extend plays, he is an elite athlete, period, the end. And he is he's not Lenore Sellers. You'll probably show this on film. People do the Sellers thing, and I'm like, no, they're not the same. Sellers is an elite athlete also, but he's not as good of a thrower as Green. Green can make throws, and here lately, especially against Mississippi State, I know State sucks. I get it. But against State, he made some really good throws. And he has as much as I don't care for the guy sometimes personally from back in the days when I covered him, Bobby Petrino is an elite offensive coach and is a very good developer. And I think he has developed Green a little bit over the course of the season, and he's throwing the ball more effectively.
Yeah, they're good at just attacking on offense, and Petrino's always been really good at finding leverage and finding space. I don't think they're asking the quarterback to do anything outside of where he's comfortable. They've kind of honed in on where's he most comfortable and who are our best playmakers, and they're lately in particular, I think they're making a conscientious effort to get the ball to those guys. I think, for the Ole Miss offense, there is some challenge that exists in the Arkansas defense. I think that they can rush the passer. If you let them get you into, situations where they expect you to drop back, they have the ability to get after you a little bit. They're hit or miss on the back end. I kept trying to think, who do I really want to compare them to as a defense? From a structure standpoint, I see a lot of similarities in what Ole Miss tries to do at times, and really into also what Kentucky does defensively. There are good players in the front for this Arkansas team. I don't think they're the same as the players that Kentucky has, particularly in the middle.
Yeah. Jackson's an elite player. The other guys are just there.
The other guys are good. Ball, I believe number 5. He's a Atlanta area kid. Grew up down by the airport. Went to Tri-Cities High School. I know the guy that was his high school head coach for part of his high school career, and I know what he raves about the kid as a young man, and he's had some good production. He's not the kid from Kentucky, but he's an effective player. Landon Jackson can absolutely get after the quarterback. And they're a team that they like to pressure you on third down, and they're a good pressure team. I think they're at their best when they pressure. And so, if you're Ole Miss, if you can stay on schedule and get into your tempo, you possibly slow them down a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately you go back to the Arkansas-Tennessee game. And when I was kind of watching that one, is I thought that Arkansas defensively did a really nice job of keeping Tennessee off schedule, which kept them out of their tempo, and kind of let Arkansas, from a defensive standpoint, let them dictate the game a little bit more, which was where they want to be.
Let me ask you this. I'm curious your thoughts on this. Andy Staples on 3 national college football reporter. I've known Andy for a long time, like him a lot. If you're watching this on Thursday, MPW Digital Extra has already aired. Andy was one of the guests on that show. He said the one concern he has for Ole Miss in this game is that he saw what Arkansas did to Tennessee defensively. They were able to limit them. And he's like, look, I know Ole Miss and Tennessee have different wrinkles and stuff, but it's basically the same offense. You know football a lot better than I do. Andy played, but I think you know better than Andy does. Do you buy that at all? That's something that if you're Arkansas, maybe you can have a little confidence in, hey, Ole Miss and Tennessee are similar. We had some success here. We can have some success there. Or is that overplayed?
I think if you go back to Ole Miss 2 years ago, the comparison between the two offenses is much more similar. Quite honestly, I think that Lane is maybe a little bit more in his roots right now. It's a little bit more West Coast pro style. Yes, will they still try to spread the field? Are there still RPOs? Yes. They don't really play things the same way that Tennessee does, in my opinion. There's elements, yes, but there's crossover and carryover between every freaking team in college football almost.
But the offense has changed since Levy left.
I do think the offense has changed since Levy left.
Do too.
I think the personnel is different as well. And I'll say this, and I, I stand on and kind of will say, I mean, I'm not a professional in this role. Like I coach high school football. I am not a professional commentator. If anybody wants to hire me, you've got to beat out the great people at MPW Digital, but we can talk. But the big thing is, like, I don't like to throw players under the bus. I don't want to belittle players. I don't know what they're being coached. I don't know their level of injury. Like I try to look at it from a pure, just not just statistical, but I just try to look at it from an analytical standpoint and not as much of a look. Sometimes the Jimmy's better than Joe and all that fun stuff. But I watched the Tennessee game today, and there were several times where I wondered, okay, how much of the keys does the quarterback for Tennessee really have? Mm-hmm. Because there's times where everything about the picture he is being given pre-snap tells him to hand the ball off, and he's trying to throw the RPO. And there's times where I thought that everything about the pre-snap picture told him to throw the RPO, and he handed it off. And so it made me wonder, the kid is talented up there. I've not watched a ton of their games. I watched this game. I've watched a few other, little bit of them throughout the course of the season. But there were times where his decision-making, I thought, was not where I expected it to be. And again, I'm watching it at my desk weeks later. He's playing it live in front of thousands of fans and in a night environment and a televised game and all that fun stuff. But I do think that that's a thing where they play Tennessee differently. They play a lot more odd front against Tennessee. The box structure looked different. They did some different things in the secondary until they got them where they wanted them, and then they got back home in their four-man front and did some different things. And so, in my opinion, I really, part of Tennessee's kind of stagnant nature in that game was, some of it to me was maybe on just decision making, right? And not strictly on the quarterback, but definitely part of his decision making. And so I think that's a thing. If you're Ole Miss, the one thing you probably should feel good about at Ole Miss is maybe Jackson Dart hasn't quite been as explosive as you want him to be, hasn't quite been the runner we've seen him be in the past. But for the most part, his decision making has been good, in particular in the RPO game. He typically does a good job handling that. So, I thought that was interesting. This Arkansas defense, they in every other game I watch, if you go four wide, so you've got 5 linemen, a tailback, and a quarterback as an offense, they've given a 6-man box. And they are telling you, we're not going to let you run the ball unless you read somebody. We still think we can make it tough on you. You better put the ball out wide. We think we're okay out there. We think we're going to be fine. Against Tennessee, they played a lot more odd front. It was a lot more 5-man box with the late guy coming from somewhere post-snap. And so until they thought that Tennessee was in run situations, and then they changed the picture a little bit. So, they played Tennessee a little bit differently. I don't 2 years ago, you tell me they play Ole Miss the same. I say, yeah, I can see that. Right now, I don't necessarily see it. I do think that if you come out and you see Arkansas playing a lot of five-man box, whether it's even front or odd front, when Ole Miss does not have a tight end attached and everything's spread out, I think it's an indication of them saying we don't think they can beat us up front. And it's an indication of saying we're going to challenge them to run the quarterback and make him part of the run game. And I don't know if that'll be the mindset or not, but that wouldn't surprise me. There's times where Arkansas is going to press on the edge, and there's times where they're going to give you the hitch. If you give Ole Miss a hitch, Lane Kiffin will take it all day long, and then he's going to hitch and go and try to go up top at least twice a game. But there's definitely times where this Arkansas defense will give you the hitch. They are a physical defense. They are physical on the edge. As I sat down and really started looking at some different things like, number 3, Danico Slaughter, who kind of plays out as their nickel. He's a 6 foot, 190 pound. He's from down the road at Roswell High School. Like I remember seeing him in 7-on-7s. I didn't even realize that is where he was now. I think he may have been to Tennessee originally and then ended up at Arkansas. Right now, statistically, leading them in interceptions is TJ Metcalf. TJ Metcalf is from the Metcalf family that Ole Miss is so familiar with. His father, Taurus was a walk-on backup punter at Ole Miss. It was Terrence's first cousin. They're related to Terrence, to DK, the whole family. And TJ's got, I think, leading the team with 3 or 4 interceptions. And his little brother is a freshman in the same secondary. Obviously, Marcus Woodson, that played at Ole Miss, is the co-defensive coordinator, and they do a good job in the secondary. They're going to contest things. And they're going to be physical out there. And like I said, if they get you into obvious pressure situations where they feel like they can go be aggressive, they are going to be aggressive. And I think that if Ole Miss can effectively run the football on early downs, stay consistent, and control that pressure, I think there's success there for the Ole Miss offense. But it's going to be about, you limit the penalties, you limit the mistakes, and you don't do anything stupid to get behind the chains.
I'm about to hand it to you, but first, Pete, I have to ask. I know you've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Because if you haven't, you need to know this. Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love, turn them up to 11. You can choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you have never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. And with that, Pete, the floor is yours.
All right. So, I thought, just preparing for this, even though I think we all agree we'd like to see a few things going on, differently with the Ole Miss offense. People would like to see them be a little more explosive in the run game. At times be a little bit more explosive in the passing game. But I do think that ultimately, barring an offensive meltdown, it's really going to come down to what can the Ole Miss defense do against this Arkansas offense. Petrino always does a good job kind of scheming things up and attacking people. They do have some good players. I like the tailback. DeQuindon Jackson is a big-bodied kid that is tough to bring down. He's got some squirt to him. He can get in the open field, and he can make you miss. Kalen Green has the ability to be electric, both as a passer and as a run player. They've got some good guys, on the outside. Armstrong is a really good player. Isaiah, is it Satania? He's an effective player for him in the slot. They found different ways to give him the football. And then, production drops off a little bit after that, but there's still some guys that have been very effective. Luke Haas, the tight end, gives them a lot of versatility. They can do a lot of different things with him. And so I thought we'd, take a few minutes And look, I thought the Texas A&M defense in some ways made sense to look at their approach versus the Arkansas offense. If you watched that Texas A&M game the other night, you saw they have some really good players up front. They're physical on the back end. They compete on the back end. From a structure standpoint, they do some things that are similar to what Ole Miss wants to do defensively. So it just made a lot of sense. So going back to that game, neutral site game. Obviously, as you can see on the screen, but going back to that game a few weeks ago and going to highlight a couple of plays for you. So, if you have not taken the opportunity to watch a lot of Arkansas this year, the first thing you need to know is that the man they snap the ball to on every play has the ability to absolutely make you miss. He is a big, long, lanky kid that is he can make you miss. He is fast. And he does have a live arm. He does not always make the best decisions. He will put the ball up into traffic. He will make some errant throws, but he does have the ability to make plays. And so, if you are the Ole Miss defense, what you can't have is the one-on-ones like you had against LSU and lose those battles. Now, I don't think he has the accuracy that for the most part of this season we've seen from Nussmeier. I don't think he has the same receiving core that they had at LSU, but he is certainly a weapon to be looked at. So, I put this clip on there because you're right. Early in the game, this is the third play of the game. It is third down. Texas A&M gets into a pressure package, and they do not spy the quarterback. They get into a rush, and you can see they win at two different spots very early, break down the pass pro, collapse the pocket. He's a kid. He looks like he's dead to rights, and all of a sudden he's able to stick his foot out of the ground, get out of there, and make a great throw down the field. I mean, for him to go from the drop, he tucks the ball with two arms when he feels the front side pressure. He dips out of it. He climbs the pocket now and then reclaims and gets himself really not onto a great platform, but gets his hips around to generate enough power. That is a long pass down the field to an open receiver for an explosive play right there. You have to make sure you are great in your rush lanes. And some of the problems, in my opinion, that we've seen from Ole Miss this year is there have been times, especially in that LSU game, where they got kind of clogged up on one side in pass pro. And even when there was a spy, it just gave the quarterback too much space. And it really left Perkins or whoever the spy was with so much room to cover and so much ground to cover. And this kid can make it really difficult to do. So they're going to have to do a good job being sound in their rush lanes and really taking advantage of the ability to get there up front. But then they're going to have to make sure that they are that they're getting home and they're finishing when they get there. Okay. Skipping forward just a few plays later in the game, I believe it's on their next drive. Okay. Got them in another passing situation. And now they're going to use a spy. And you can see what Texas A&M actually does here is they show a five-man pressure. They're playing a man coverage behind it, and they are actually going to spy with two players here. If the back were to release, he is going to take the back and go in man-to-man. When the back stays in protection, he becomes essentially an extra spy. He's going to take the back if he were to leak out late right here. Okay, there's the flush right there. They get upfield around the edge. You can see both tackles struggle a little bit with the speed rush. Quarterback steps up again. There's the spy. This is where you have to get him. If you can cut him off, if you allow him to outflank you and get going here, it is going to be a long day. If you can get here and force him into this retreat mode, accuracy goes down, ability to escape goes down. And yes, does he have the opportunity to maybe still make some throws down the field? Absolutely. But the likelihood of that really drastically drops. And so you have to do a great job on that angle, cutting him off and trying to get him into this kind of drop where he is losing ground as he gets out of the pocket. You see this several times during the course of this game where they're able to take that great angle, use their team speed, and get him kind of retreating, and typically ends up working out well for the defense. Okay. Skipping forward, next drive. Okay. Petrino is always going to give you a ton of looks, and you're always going to get some under center stuff from Petrino. And you are going to have to always make sure against the Bobby Petrino offense, you better defend the perimeter. And some of that is going to come in the way of things like toss sweep and jet sweep. Some of it is going to come in the way of things like wheel routes. Okay. Here, they are going to use one of their guys, and they are going to get into an under center jet sweep. They're going to take the tight end to the right of the formation. He is going to arc release to try and go set an edge. Everybody else is going to work a wide zone the opposite direction. In some offenses, this is called predetermined. In some offenses, the quarterback is actually going to make the decision pre-snap based on where the numbers are and where leverage is. You can see here, he makes the decision to give it. They get one man out in front. They have enough speed. This goes from a 1st and 10. They get a nice gain there, keeps them efficient. Now you're looking at a 2nd and 3, much more manageable, even if you don't have success on 2nd down. 3rd down is more manageable. And Petrino does a good job, really, of trying to keep them on schedule and forcing you to defend every inch of the field in how he does it. Okay. The very next snap, they come down, and this was really one of my favorite schemes that I've seen from them in particular. One kind of modern trend in college football that you see from a ton of teams is they are going to motion, or they're going to use a sniffer or fullback type player that is going to come behind the line of scrimmage. And to the boundary, they're typically going to work either a post or a curl. And it's a concept we've talked about before. They're going to kind of show a block. They're going to be a little bit lazy before leaking out into a wheel route. And whoever comes behind the line of scrimmage is going to come into the flat. Most teams do that off of a zone action the opposite way, and the quarterback is going to RPO off of that end. Petrino and Arkansas here are going to get to a very similar look, but they're going to do it off of a gap scheme. So what they're actually going to do is they're going to block a counter scheme into that boundary. They're going to pull this guard, so they're going to be down on the front side. They're going to pull the left guard to the boundary, and they're going to pull the inline tight end for this linebacker. Okay, if this guy were to come down and squeeze hard, the quarterback is probably going to pull it and work his little RPO flood action out there under the boundary. If he is upfield, we're going to hand it off, and we're going to kick that dude out and get underneath it. So I'm going to let it run one time from the wide copy, and then we'll look at it from the end zone. You can see there's the pull coming behind it. He sees from a quarterback perspective. He's going to read the DN to his right. Ball is snapped. There he is. You see he's reading this DN. This end squeezes. His eyes are inside. So now he's just going to pull the ball, get on the perimeter, dump it off right there for an easy gain. They go from 2nd and 3. It's an easy conversion. It's a really nice wrinkle and way to get to the same popular RPO concept that so many teams are running, but they're finding a really nice way to do it with a gap scheme, something that's a little bit more downhill. Okay. They have a handful of plays a game where they're going to ask him to read it and be a runner. They're always going to carry a couple things where they're going to straight up ask the quarterback to be the designed runner. And then there's, but there's always going to be situations where you're going to have to account for him. This is one of the ways that they potentially can use him to account for him. So they end up putting both fullbacks on the same side right here, and they are going to work a zone concept to the right, and they are going to arc both of these tight ends, and they are going to load this perimeter. They're going to read the end man on the line of scrimmage. If he sits, now that means that you are blocking 5 with your offensive line for your tailback downhill. If he squeezes and comes down the line to play the running back, quarterback pulls it, and now you were looking to be outmanned on this side because you blocked this down linebacker, this nickel, and now you work up and block this safety, and you potentially have an explosive play. So it's just, again, it's divide the defense, create numbers and leverage, and he is always going to make you defend the outside. So there it is. He's reading the end right there. The end squeezes to take the running back. He pulls it, and you see the load action out here. Both these players, and if you're Ole Miss that likes to play so much man-to-man, when these guys widen to block, they might look like they're releasing for a flat route. So you have to expand with them. If you don't get somebody to replace over the top, be it a backer or a safety, there is a ton of green grass for him to go. Now, Texas A&M does a phenomenal job of folding back in and winning the block right there.
I was going to say, it looked like he was about to take off.
Listen, this absolutely should have been right there for a touchdown, quite honestly. They do a great job of they really get lucky. They fall back in there, and winning this battle right here slows him down enough, and it's a hell of a play by that kid. But again, it's simple design. There's nothing earth-shattering about the design. There's nothing groundbreaking, but it is going to force you to be disciplined. He is going to force you to account for the quarterback in the run game. And there were times the other day where Oklahoma was able to scheme some things up for the quarterback and have some success in the run game. Skipping forward a good bit, moving on much later in the game. The other thing they do for him quite a bit is they will get into not always trips formations, but often a trips formation. And they will give him a zone beater to one side of the field and a man beater to the other. And if you give him a predictable look, he understands where to go to with the football. They are going to press the single receiver with nobody underneath it. The safety is cheated to the three-man side right here. So he knows right now, if I see pressure, especially pressure from the side where my single receiver is, I'm going to take my one-on-one matchup, whether it's a slant or a comeback or a vertical route. I'm going to take that matchup. If I see pressure from the field and it looks like they're going to drop out and I'm going to get some type of zone rotation to the three-man side, I'm going to work my zone beater to the three-man side. Here, he sees the pressure coming from the single. He's patient, sticks his foot in the ground. The receiver's able to win on the outside. And again, it is just an easy conversion right here. Get the first down on a 3rd and 7 by throwing this slant route right here. Kid does a great job winning inside. He's a big-bodied kid, and they do a nice job converting that. If he would have gotten zone, if they would have kept another safety over here to bracket this receiver, they've given him a nice zone beater to this side of the field that is going to allow him to just work his easy trip side. But he does a nice job recognizing what the coverage is, and he's able to get it to his big receiver. Okay. Right here, a couple plays later. Okay. Again, I picked out a couple throws. I kind of wanted to showcase his arm strength, and it is to your point. He is not the South Carolina kid. He is not Sellers. He is more accurate. He is a better passer when he is given a clean pocket. So he is going to throw this comeback to the top of the screen to the field. So you're looking at a 14 back to 12 comeback route. It's a decent route by the receiver. Ball, he hits the top of his drop. He takes one extra hitch. Ball is out in rhythm, and it doesn't float out there. He gets that ball out there pretty easily. They stress the seams with the outside receivers, with the inside receivers, and he's just going to take the matchup and the coverage that he likes. And if he can get it to number 2, he's going to get it to number 2.
Yeah, I mean, here's the pushback, for lack of a better word, on the Sellers thing. Frankly, the Sellers comparison that a lot of people make is cheap. It's cheap. Only Jackson Dart and Garrett Nussmeier in the SEC have thrown for more yards than Taylor Green.
Yeah.
Only Garrett Nussmeier, Jackson Dart, and Carson Beck have completed more passes than Taylor Green. I mean, those are the two key stats. I mean, I'm not saying he's Nussmeier or Dart. I'm not saying that at all, but
Well,
does have some numbers that indicate that, hey, for a guy who is inconsistent with his throws, he does occasionally make some throws. And Armstrong, really the only receiver in the league who consistently has better numbers than Andrew Armstrong is Trey Harris.
right. I was curious, so I pulled it up. Okay. He threw for 408 yards against Arkansas Pine Bluff. He threw for 416 against Oklahoma State. He threw for 280 versus A&M. He threw for 297 versus Tennessee, 240 versus LSU, 315 versus Mississippi State. Now, against Mississippi State, they also handed it off 37 times. Against Tennessee, he threw for 297. They handed it off 44 times, or at least they were credited with a rush 44 times. The only SEC game that he has not thrown for over 240 was the Auburn game, where they were credited with 55 rushing attempts. So he has been effective as a passer. Absolutely has been effective as a passer this season. Just kind of continuing to move through. Now, this is the thing about him, okay? And this is perfect timing for you to interject and say that. The kid has talent. He can do it. You also get plays like this right here.
Yep.
Okay. 2x2, they drop back. They give him this post wheel on both sides. And here they are again. It is a 3-man rush. They show this mugged look from the two inside backers to try and force man-on-man with the tackles. They don't want anybody to be able to help the tackles. They win the edge pressure, especially on the right tackle down here. Okay, and he kind of gets dumped and held by the right tackle, but now you're forcing Sellers out of the pocket. Now the running back gets out. So now, because the running back gets out into a route, one of the spies has to take him. The other spy is on the backside, is slightly out of position. He gets out of the pocket right here. And, listen, you're in a situation here. I believe this is just before the half. They're trying to press the field and score right here. You would love to see your quarterback with this type of ability stick his foot in the ground and go in most situations.
Yep.
That's not what he chooses to do right here. He pushes the ball down the field. Kid from A&M makes a great play on the ball, and there's the turnover and the interception, right? So he will make some decisions that are not what the coaching staff wants him to make. Yeah, and here's always a few throws I would venture to say they want back. They got
puts his foot in the ground there and runs, he probably runs for 15, 20 yards.
There's certainly I mean, everybody's in man coverage. If he takes off and runs and he can beat this guy right here, absolutely he's got a chance, if nothing else, to potentially move the chains, get out of bounds, and preserve a little clock, right? He chooses to throw it here, and there's a handful of times in this game where he throws it and you're thinking, maybe he should have run right there.
Sure.
And they came up with this one. There's a couple that they didn't come up with that they easily could have in this game. Moving forward into the second half, a little bit later in the game, again, the importance of maintaining leverage versus a Bobby Petrino offense is always going to be important. So like right here, okay, same idea as the play I showed you earlier, different presentation. They are going to run a inside zone or duo concept here, and they are just going to block everybody up. And all that he is doing is reading one of these exterior defenders, okay? So right here, he's probably reading the end, and I'm going to go to the end zone here. Okay. He's reading the end. The end goes inside. Now it's one-on-one, and look at all these hats coming inside. If that's how they want to fit this ball, this player has to be outside and the corner has to stay put. What you see instead, you see him crossing face now, and now you have every Texas A&M defender inside. You give him leverage to get out of the pocket, he is going to make you pay. And when Bobby Petrino puts him in the read game, when they give him a chance to pull the football and run, he will absolutely make you pay. So Ole Miss is going to have to do a great job maintaining that leverage, keeping him hemmed up. And it might be a matter of forcing the handoff, right, to take him out of the game with his legs. They are timely. This is a 3rd and 1.5, 3rd and 2, and he obviously pops it for a big play. Okay. skipping forward, and this is kind of the last one again, showing you his arm. He is going to throw a deep out route from the opposite hash to the wide side of the field. Okay. He is going to hit his drop. He's going to hold the safety with the neutral drop. His eyes are downfield. He is not staring down this out route down here. If he stares it down, this nickel, once the slot receiver goes inside, this nickel is going to expand. Because field, I can hug the seam a little bit more, which means I am not getting out underneath this out route. Top of my drop, hitch one time, ball on a rope right there for a nice. That is a, that ball's completed 15 yards downfield and all the way to the opposite hash, and it's damn near out of bounds. They do give the kid credit for the catch. I don't know if they came back and reviewed it later. I can't remember, but that's a good throw. You are going to have to defend every inch of the field. And I do think, listen, Ole Miss is better up front. Ole Miss, whether they rush 4 or 3, I think there's opportunity. If Ole Miss is healthy up front, I think that there is opportunity for them to get to the quarterback and disrupt him. They are just going to have to do a really good job of making sure to corral him, to not allow him to get loose and use his legs or his arm. And when he does get out of the pocket, you've got to be really good in the back end of staying in coverage.
What's your gut feel on how this one plays out? There's a lot of people that have taken Arkansas and the 6.5, 7 points. Fewer people like me who kind of think this is a 10 to 14 point Ole Miss win. What are your thoughts?
I've had 2 experiences where I traveled with the Ole Miss football team to Fayetteville, and they were both nightmares. I don't fully buy into the whatever but in my opinion, if there's a place that is cursed, damn it, that's cursed, right? So I'm the wrong person to ask. What time is kickoff?
11 a.m.
Right? Like that to me is a good thing. You go back and you look at some of those other games when they play at night. Any SEC home game at night is a hell of an environment, right? Hopefully everybody had too much fun on Friday night and it's a late starting crowd and part of it on the road at all times and anytime you're playing a competent football team is you have to go weather the storm, right? Your special teams, your defense have to travel, your run game have to travel. And those things can't disappear because those are the things that can keep the crowd out of it, that can keep you out of these dire situations where a defense can pin their ears back and a crowd can get loud and maybe you miscommunicate something. And so if those things travel, and if this game were in Oxford, Ole Miss is the better football team.
Mm-hmm.
If they're healthy. I firmly believe that. What I don't know right now is how healthy is the Ole Miss football team? What is the status of some of their better players on both sides of the ball? And what that looks like. If they can roll in there healthy, I think that you have to like your chances. Vegas will not hire me to make odds anytime soon. So I don't know if I can put a point on it. And a lot of that for me just strictly comes down to who is Ole Miss really going to show up with when it is third down and they have to get Green down and off and get that Arkansas offense off the field. What defensive line's in the game? Those are the things to me that make this difficult to answer. I do think Ole Miss is the better football team. It's who shows up, both from a health standpoint and from an execution standpoint.
Should absolutely be an interesting game. Ole Miss and Arkansas again, 11 a.m. on Saturday morning, Reynolds Razorback Stadium there in Fayetteville. Ole Miss next week. That's why this game feels so critical because, obviously, at this point, every game's critical. A loss and you're out, basically. But a win, and it'll be Ole Miss and Georgia, 2:30 Central Time, 3:30 Eastern in Oxford on ABC the next week in a game that for Ole Miss, kind of feels like a chance at redemption, a Super Bowl, this giant David versus Goliath. There's a whole lot we could get to on that one, but it only becomes pertinent and really almost it only becomes relevant even if Ole Miss beats Arkansas. If Ole Miss loses to Arkansas, the Georgia game doesn't really matter. And that I hate saying that's bad for business. It's not a good thing to say, but it's true. And when your brand is, hey, tell it like it is, that's like it is. If you lose to Arkansas, the Georgia game's not going to matter. And the season, I think, has a chance. Frankly, I'll be honest, I think the season has a chance to spiral if they lose to Arkansas on Saturday.
Yeah, I think if you're an Ole Miss fan, if I remember right from reading one of your articles, I think Kiffin mentioned in one of the press conferences that maybe early in the season, maybe in that Kentucky game, they were playing tight, right? They felt the pressure of the expectation, and a lot of that expectation was built from the inside, and I think they were kind of feeling that. What you hope at this point is that they show up on Saturday in Fayetteville and they're not weighted down by the pressure, because at this point the reality is Ole Miss is already in the college football playoffs, and what I mean by that is it's win or you're done, right? And so whether that actually starts after the regular season begins and you're one of the 12, or it starts right now because you're on the bubble trying to get it in, you're playing playoff football. And that's something we talk a lot about at the high school level, and it's a very real thing. And how you manage the expectation and the pressure is certainly part of it.
Yeah, the psychology of Saturday is fascinating, and it's one. I think a lot of if you do like, I don't know if you remember, you might be too young. When I was a kid, the NFL Today was Brent Musburger and Irv Cross and Jimmy the Greek Snyder, and they would go to the board and they'd go offense, quarterbacks, running backs, and they do checks. And intangibles was one of the things. I think if they did psychology, I'd put psychology in Arkansas's check, because the pressure's on Ole Miss. Arkansas has no pressure. They're not playing for the playoffs. They're not going to the playoffs. They never thought about the playoffs. They never talked about the playoffs. For Ole Miss, a loss is catastrophic. For Arkansas, a loss that sucks. Hey, we'll take a week off. We'll try against Texas in 2 weeks. It's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the beginning of the game is critical. If you tell me that Ole Miss jumps out to a strong start, I think they win. The longer the game is competitive and weird, the more I think things probably start to favor Arkansas, because Ole Miss thinks about it and Arkansas just plays a football game.
Yeah, you want to avoid a swing like you had at LSU, where you've got the lead and suddenly they score and then it's a turnover and you give them the ball back. If you can avoid those few minutes of kind of meltdown and catastrophe, you certainly have to like the odds, obviously a little bit more. But I agree with you. The longer a team with nothing to lose, especially in their home stadium, the longer they linger, the worse it can get.
We will be back next week. We'll talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. I remember that show last year. It was kind of sobering to watch Georgia on film before that game. So we'll look at the Dogs next week. Again, Ole Miss and Arkansas will have post-game coverage at MPW Digital. I'll be in Fayetteville. Chase will be guiding the post-game show. So we'll talk about that afterwards. We've been brought to you by our friends at Meadowbrook. Don't forget, Meadowbrook Wealth Advisors of Raymond James, 601-368-2215, or ryan.geary@raymondjames.com. For Pete DeWeese, I'm Neil McCready. Until next time, have a great weekend. We will talk to you soon.